listening to 106.7, Wilmington's Big Talker, and my name is Paul Vallone. I'd like to welcome you to Guns, Politics, and Freedom, where each Sunday at 5 p.m., as part of the Sunday Night Political Power Block, we give you the ammunition to better defend your gun rights. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at hyattguns.com. Now, in case you aren't familiar with me, I direct Grassroots North Carolina, or GRNC, since 1994, our state's most effective gun rights organization. As its director, I was involved in drafting and passing our original concealed handgun law. Since then, GRNC has gone on to engineer passage of concealed handgun reciprocity, our purchase permit bypass, Castle Doctrine and Stand Your Ground, the expansion of concealed carry into state and municipal parks, restaurants, public assemblies, educational properties, and much more. Grassroots North Carolina is exactly what the name implies, a grassroots collection of people from all walks of life who share a common concern that our constitutionally guaranteed freedoms are being eroded. Check us out at grnc.org. That's grnc.org. Our topic today will be the latest gun control threat to spread like a virus across the country, namely so-called red flag laws, otherwise known as extreme risk protection orders. Our guest to discuss the topic will be Mike Hammond, the Legislative Counsel for the 1.5 million member Gun Owners of America. Later in the show, we will examine how gun owners fared in the May 8th primary elections. I'm happy to say that Grassroots North Carolina was active in 37 primary election races across the state, of which we were victorious in 25. But we'll talk later about the specifics and who stays and who goes. We would, however, like to note that those are excellent results, particularly given that unlike certain other national organizations, we do not inflate our win ratio by supporting mediocre incumbents against better challengers. In fact, GRNC's Political Action Committee, the GRNC Political Victory Fund, makes a point of going after politicians who damage gun rights each time, every time, and regardless of the chances of victory. You see, by doing that, we force anti-gun politicians to do a cost-benefit analysis. Whenever they want to push anti-gun legislation, we make them ask, is it really worth the aggravation? But first, let's talk about Dick's Sporting Goods. You know that old saying that when you find you've dug your way into a hole, you should stop digging? Well, apparently corporate management at Dick's doesn't see it that way. In fact, we could sum all of this up as see Dick's dig. Dig, Dick's, dig. As you may recall, first, Dick's Sporting Goods unilaterally decided to stop selling those nasty old semi-automatic firearms that the left loves to hate. They also stopped selling firearms to lawful buyers under the age of 21. You may recall that shortly thereafter we had on our show here a courageous young man named Griffin McCullough who resigned from Dick's based on his principles and his support for the Second Amendment, even though he had previously been happy with his job at Dick's. But none of this was enough for Dick's. Even despite sagging sales and overwhelmingly negative input from its own customers, Dick's continued to dig. Next, Dick's decided it wasn't enough to simply stop selling those nasty old semi-automatic weapons. It also had to destroy those it already had in inventory. Now, if you're a shareholder, I'm not really sure how you should react to having the corporation destroy what is effectively your property. But anyways, apparently Dick's CEO, Edward Stack, was trying to ingratiate himself with gun ban advocates after the Parkland shootings, saying that his store, and I quote, doesn't want to be part of that story any longer. One might think the story would end there, but apparently Stack figures he hasn't alienated enough true Americans yet. So even as the sales in his stores tanked and his stock dropped by 10% or so, He went right ahead and hired 3 anti-gun lobbyists to lobby Congress against your right to keep and bear arms. Yes, you heard it right. This rocket scientist is now lobbying Congress against his own clientele. And how might the firearms industry react, you ask? Well, I'm happy to report they responded by putting principles ahead of profits. First, Springfield Armory severed their ties with Dick's, saying, quote, "We will not accept Dick's Sporting Goods' continued attempts to deny Second Amendment freedoms to our fellow Americans. Go get 'em, Springfield Armory." Next, all of the members of the gun industry trade group called the National Shooting Sports Foundation, NSSF, voted unanimously to eject Dick's from the organization. But we're not done yet. Now Mossberg, maker of sporting shotguns, exactly the type of guns that you would think that Dick's would want to sell, and other firearms, also cut Dick's loose, saying they would no longer accept orders from the retailer. Said Ivor Mossberg, the chief executive officer of O.F. Mossberg & Sons, quote, "It has come to our attention that Dick's Sporting Goods recently hired lobbyists on Capitol Hill to promote additional gun control. Make no mistake, Mossberg is a staunch supporter of the U.S. Constitution and our Second Amendment rights, and we fully disagree with Dick's Sporting Goods' recent anti-Second Amendment actions." See Dick's dig. Dig, Dick's, dig. To help them dig the hole just a little deeper, I would suggest that you mail Mr. Stack your Dick's discount card. You know those little cards they give you to get discounts on stuff? And I always maintained that at Dick's, I think the deal when they sent you a discount card would last about 2 minutes before it was expired. But anyways, send your discount card to Dick's along with a short note explaining why you will never again buy from Dick's Sporting Goods, or its subsidiary Field and Stream. For instructions on how to do that, I would suggest going to Grassroots North Carolina's homepage at grnc.org. Again, that's grnc.org. The fact is, at this point, only one solution is acceptable for Dick's Sporting Goods, and that is to drive them out of business, to make an example to others who seek to lobby against your rights and undermine your rights in the, interest of making a profit. Since I can only presume that if Dick's wanted to stop selling nasty old semi-automatic firearms, that, of course, would be their business. But apparently, they didn't want anybody else to have a marketing advantage over them, so they went to make sure that nobody else could sell those nasty old semi-automatic firearms either. And they hired 3 lobbyists to lobby against your rights. This is unfathomable. Even in the 1990s, when Smith & Wesson was owned by, I believe it was Tompkins PLC, a British company, and they knuckled under to the Clinton administration, and began, instituting unilateral gun control themselves. I remember, and somebody just reminded me of this, that during the 2000 NRA convention in Charlotte, there were stickers going around that said, Smith & Wesson must die. And that's pretty much what we should be doing to Dick's Sporting Goods right now. Nothing else will work except to drive them from business and make sure that they serve as an example to others. Again, go to grnc.org, grnc.org, and there you will find the alert that will help you register your input to Dick's Sporting Goods. Meanwhile, you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7 WilmingtonBigTalker.com. We're going to take a short break, after which we will return to hear from our guest, GOA Legislative Counsel Mike Hammond, and the dangers posed by the left's latest gun confiscation scheme, namely the so-called extreme risk protection orders. My name is Paul Vallona, and you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com, sponsored by Hyatt Gun Shop, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. For the next couple of segments, we will discuss a topic which has dominated the news after recent shootings, and which a North Carolina legislator has vowed to introduce here when the legislature convenes in May, on May 16th, namely next week. These are what have been called by some extreme risk protection orders, or elsewhere red flag laws. Like so much gun control, they hail from the People's Republic of California. And essentially what they allow people to do is to declare you a risk and petition a court to confiscate your firearms. These laws have recently been enacted in Florida and Maryland and elsewhere, I'm told a total of 9 states. Moreover, as I said, we will see one introduced next week in the North Carolina General Assembly by Senator Marcia Morey, a Democrat from Durham and a former judge, who has announced far and wide her plans to introduce the measure here. Our guest for the segments will be Michael Hammond, Legislative Counsel for Gun Owners of America, the 1.5 million member organization which bills itself correctly as the only no-compromise gun rights organization in Washington. Mike recently had a column published in USA Today entitled Kafkaesque Red Flag Laws Strip Gun Owners of Their Constitutional Rights. So Mike is uniquely well-suited to describe the dangers of these laws. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you for having me, Paul, and hello, Tar Heels.
And by the way, we should note that Mike was kind enough to come down in years past when we introduced the first constitutional carry law in North Carolina, which at that point was called a Vermont carry law. Back in the 1990s, we drafted and introduced the first one, which I'm sorry to say, Mike, we have yet to pass. We have it in yet again in House Bill 746. Got it through the House, and hopefully we can get a hearing in the Senate.
Well, Oklahoma's going to be the 15th, probably in a week or so hurry up.
Yeah, I know. Matter of fact, we had originally said we were trying to be lucky 13. We blew that one, too. So anyway, Mike, tell us about these extreme risk protection orders. I mean, how bad can they be? After all, we don't want dangerous people having guns, right?
They're called red flag laws or extreme violence protection orders, but, I mean, when the left talks about red flag laws or assault weapons or anything else, you have to understand that's not what they are. That's just a sugar coating to try to make something which is nasty and Kafkaesque look better than it in fact is. What they are is this. Now, I assume that they were, the first one was drafted somewhere in the back room of Bloomberg's office in New York City, and they've been exported to places like California, Washington, Oregon, and Connecticut. But if you look at the 30 states which have introduced proposed bills like this, guess what? They all have the same components. They all have many of the same details. Sometimes they vary what the standard of proof is, but you can tell that they are all drafted out of the same template, which was originally crafted in New York and is exported to places like North Carolina with the expectation that North Carolina will be a puppet state and will adopt laws comparable to New York. So, first of all, drafted by the far-left gun control movement exported as though they were somehow individually conceived in each of the state capitals, but obviously not. What are they? Basically, if a angry ex, and this is commonality of all of the bills, someone who's angry at you and is related to you, or alternatively the police decide that they don't like you, you're dangerous, or whatever, they can go into what's called a secret court. It's an ex parte proceeding. And an ex parte proceeding means you're not allowed to attend. As a matter of fact, you're not notified, and you're barred from attending. And in this secret Kafkaesque Orwellian court, in which only the accuser is present, they try to convince a judge to take away a whole bunch of your constitutional rights without you knowing about it. Now, when I say a whole bunch, Second Amendment rights, but also in most cases, they vary in details as to how explicit they are about the ability to search your house. But basically, what's going to happen is the police are going to arrive at your door in a day or two. They are going to ransack your house, and if you resist, they're going to arrest or perhaps even shoot you and your family. Remember Ruby Ridge? So that's what these orders are. Now, how willing is a judge to grant an order? Well, the theory in the legal circles, and I hate to say I am a lawyer, but in my defense, I'm not a very good one. But the notion in legal circles is that if only the accuser is in the room, the judge will sign a ham sandwich, and he surely will. In Seattle, where these things are in effect, one study showed that 28 out of 29 requests had been granted. In Massachusetts, which has sort of comparable restraining orders, not as extreme as these, but sort of analogous to these, one of the proponents of the ex parte proceedings conceded, well, judges don't ask me questions. So the accuser goes into a Kafkaesque star chamber secret procedure, gets a malleable judge, and believe me, they're always malleable, to sign an order taking away your constitutional rights for anywhere from 3 to 21 days. Now, I'd ask, what if it were the constitutional right to publish a newspaper, to a free press? What if I could go in to a secret court and get a judge to sign an order suspending publication of a New York Times for 21 days? Or what if I could go in and get an order allowing a person to be arrested for 21 days before they're notified of the charges against them? Or what if I could get an order?
2 points?
Yeah.
2 points. First off, one's a question and then one is a point.
Yeah.
The question is, are all of these done in ex parte hearings? Because I know ex parte hearings have their history in domestic violence restraining orders, or what in North Carolina we call 50B orders, and they don't work out real well there either. But are they all ex parte?
No, all of them have ex parte hearings. Okay. All of them presumably start with ex parte hearings. Now, guess what? After 20 days, after 21 days perhaps, under most of these bills, yeah, you can go in, you can spend $10,000, you can convince a judge he made a mistake, and that's your hearing. But guess what? First of all, most gun owners don't have $10,000 to spend off the top of their head on lawyers. And second of all, most judges aren't willing to concede that they were idiots.
Yeah, there's one. Yeah, I agree.
Amazingly.
The point I was going to make, though, is you mentioned that it could be family members or angry exes or police that could make these complaints. At least according to what we've seen here, under Senator Maury's proposal, it could also be friends or colleagues, quote unquote. I somehow envision that angry neighbor who doesn't like me shooting on my property but can't do anything about it, making a complaint about me. Couldn't that be a likely,
well, yes,
likely outcome?
They differ in terms of that little detail of who can bring the complaints.
So ours would be worse than most.
California started out angry relative, but recently they've expanded it to a lot of other people, including school administrators. So it's a pretty slippery slope as to who can bring the complaints. But if this version says that an angry friend or neighbor can bring a complaint, then it is broader and nastier than even California's law.
That's exactly what I was suspecting. Yes, I see your point. So essentially, even though we do get a hearing, because the NRA has said, well, if they have due process of law, we have no problems with it. But the fact is, due process of law means 21 days or more after you've had your guns confiscated. Then you could spend 10 grand or whatever it takes to get your guns back. That, in my way of thinking, and I believe yours, is not adequate due process of law.
That's not due process at all. It's Donald Trump's take the guns first, worry about due process later. But that's not the way due process works. Okay. Due process happens before you lose your constitutional rights, or guess what? It's not due process at all.
Got it. All right, we're going to take a quick break here, but then we're going to come back and continue this discussion. You are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7. Please join us after the break when we resume our discussion of the dangers posed by seemingly benign red flag, or as Mike puts it, gun confiscation laws being proposed here in North Carolina. My name is Paul Vallone, and you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com, sponsored by Hyatt Gun Shop, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. We're speaking with Mike Hammond, Legislative Counsel for the 1.5 million member Gun Owners of America, about his article in USA Today outlining the dangers of so-called extreme risk protection orders so far passed in 9 states and being introduced next week in the North Carolina legislature. Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, all right? But
I would never do that.
You would in a heartbeat, and I know
You're never wrong.
So, just to reiterate, we are talking about confiscation orders being issued in ex parte or emergency hearings in which the defendant doesn't get a chance to participate. I want people to understand this. Is that a fair assessment?
Secret star chamber procedures, not just emergency, secret procedures in which you're specifically barred from having any participation in the procedure. And as a result of this secret, almost automatic issuance of a gun confiscation order, you lose your guns. And make no mistake about it, these are gun confiscation orders. We need to stop using the other side's logo designed to sugarcoat what gun confiscation is.
An excellent point. And in fact, we will be talking about how to describe these bills in North Carolina very soon. If I were to get my guns confiscated because somebody claims I'm dangerous, which, as I said, under our reports, I haven't seen the verbiage yet from Senator Maury's proposal here in North Carolina, but if the reports are accurate, it isn't just family members or angry exes that could do this, but also, quote, friends and colleagues, which could be virtually anybody, making this potentially worse than even some of the other states that have enacted these things. So if somebody claims I'm dangerous, tell me again, how do I get my guns back?
After a period of time, perhaps 21 days, you can spend $10,000 on a lawyer and expert witnesses and go back, probably before the same judge, and convince him he's an idiot and made a mistake. I don't know how many judges you know, but most of the ones I've dealt with don't like to concede that they made a mistake or that they're an idiot. And so you're not going to get your guns back. And let me say this. The NRA in 2007 came in when we were stripping veterans of of their rights without due process.
Oh, yeah.
And said,
I remember.
well, we'll create this special procedure where they can get their guns back. We recently had the VA report to us on how many of the 400,000 veterans who had been stripped of their rights had gotten their guns back under this special procedure. Guess how many? 44 out of 400,000. So that's your chances. That's your chances that you're ever going to get your guns back.
I don't know, what is that, 1/100th of a single percent or less? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a very, very,
infinitesimal,
very small number.
So, this, of course, the thing that gets me is that this is being presented to us, okay, this process to regain your rights after they have confiscated your guns, okay, this is being told, we're being told that this is adequate due process under the Fifth Amendment. Is there any, and I don't know this at all, is there any Supreme Court, are there any decisions on whether or not that is an adequate protection of the Fifth Amendment?
No, this goes far beyond anything we've seen so far. Now, there have been lower court rulings with respect to things like restraining orders, but all the other things that this is being compared to are different. This has basically, in most cases, and some laws, such as New York's proposal, are very explicit about the ability to ransack your house. Others leave that up in the air, and guess how that's going to be resolved. Yeah. But at any rate, there is, in order to ransack your house, basically these laws don't require a probable cause that you have committed a crime or that there's any crime at all, unlike the Constitution and the Fourth Amendment requires, unlike temporary restraining orders having to do with domestic violence. They don't limit your contact. They strip you of broad ranges of constitutional rights. And so they're being compared to things which are much more limited in nature than what these would do. And again, what they would do is strip you of your Second, Fourth, and 14th Amendment rights in their almost entirety without any hearing at all, which you're allowed to participate in, without the requirement of a showing of probable cause that you've committed a crime, that you will commit a crime, or that there's any crime in existence. They are nasty and Orwellian in a sense that nothing else which has been put on the law books is.
It's funny you mentioned you used the analogy to the movie Minority Report, where they had the pre-crime unit. That's exactly what I had been thinking of, and I've actually used that movie as a harbinger of things to come many times. It's funny you had mentioned that. It is that movie itself. People haven't seen it. It's scary. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. You mentioned the USA Today piece. It's truly scary. So let's talk about, do we have any evidence of how these things have been applied so far? I do know I've seen accounts of immediately after Florida passed it, somebody got their guns confiscated by some reports without any kind of serious due process whatsoever. Do you have any reports of people getting guns confiscated?
We do. They've only been in effect for over a few months in places like in 5 states. Mm-hmm. But in those 5 states, we know in Washington, the judges rubber stamp all of the orders. We know with respect to comparable things in Massachusetts, the judges rubber stamp the orders. We know that under these circumstances, judges will sign ham sandwiches. And we know with respect to a temporary restraining order, which is probably less narrow than this, that a woman in New Mexico was able to convince a judge to get a temporary restraining order against David Letterman because supposedly he was sending her coded words over her television set.
Okay, then. Well, that pretty much says it all.
So, don't send coded words to lonely ladies in New Mexico over the television set if you want to keep your guns.
One of the things that gets me is that, first off, we are depriving this individual of their constitutional rights. But if they are truly a danger to self or others, aren't they still a danger to self or others? Because all we've done is maybe confiscate a firearm or two. We don't know for a fact that those are all of the firearms, or we don't know for a fact that if that person is truly dangerous, that they might not go rent a U-Haul truck and drive it down a crowded pedestrian thoroughfare and kill 30 people with a van. I mean, it seems to me that if we were serious, we would be removing the people from the population.
We do know that that they would take rights away from people for no justification. But what we also know is that, look, in cases like Nicholas Cruz, the guy had come to the attention of law enforcement and the school authorities 80 times. During most of those times, he had committed a felony. Guess what? Under law which has been in existence since 1968, just charging him with that felony would prohibit him from buying guns. And yet they didn't charge him with that felony because they considered him, quote, a low risk, close quote. If Nicholas Cruz was a low risk, then the addition of gun confiscation orders isn't going to get Nicholas Cruz.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, the Waffle House shootings in Nashville were committed by somebody who had had his Illinois firearms owner identification card, FOID, revoked. Okay, and he had to surrender his guns. Yet here he is.
Yeah, he came from basically one of the fascist repressive states in the country that requires licensure. They took his guns away, and guess what? It didn't do any good whatsoever because criminals will find a way to get guns. That's why they're called criminals.
Well, see, this is why it so clearly delineates what the motives are of the people behind these laws. If they were really interested in our safety, they would remove dangerous people from the population and have them, involuntarily committed. But instead, they merely strip them of their rights because, of course, they want to strip everybody's rights.
Yes.
Well,
their ultimate goal is basically the elimination of firearms in America, and I think we found that out from the Parkland demonstrations. Anything short of that is just an intermediate goal. If there's one thing I've learned from being very, very old and being in this game 43 years, it's that their goal is not the next piece of legislation. Their goal is ultimately the elimination of firearms.
Precisely what I've been saying. Well, thank you for joining us, Mike, and for alerting gun owners to the dangers posed we're being told are relatively benign proposals. Again, thank you for your op-ed article as well, and keep up the good work at GOA, please.
Thank you, Paul.
Meanwhile, you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talk. We'll be back in just a moment, and we'll discuss the how gun rights advocates fared in North Carolina in Tuesday's primary elections. My name is Paul Vallone, and you are listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom today on Wilmington's Big Talker, 106.7 WilmingtonBigTalker.com. Our show is sponsored by Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop. Check them out at HyattGuns.com. Now, I don't think many would argue that the 2018 elections will be pivotal in charting the direction of American society. Frankly, leftists saw their socialist utopia snatched from their grasp with the loss of Hillary Clinton in 2016, and they are pissed. Not just angry, mind you, but rather a spitting, snarling, snapping kind of rage. Like zombies from an episode of The Walking Dead, theirs is an unthinking primal hunger to destroy you as a conservative and all you stand for. But before we meet the onslaught in November, we have to ensure that our forces are up to the battle, that our battles won't be fought by weak-willed rhinos. You know what rhinos are, Republicans in name only. They won't be fought by weak-willed rhinos afraid to stand up for conservative principles. And that is why we have expended time, money, and sweat in last week's primary elections to ensure that the army we summon to the fight is in fact capable of beating the leftists. Now, to that end, Grassroots North Carolina, or rather its Political Victory Fund, our political action committee, federally registered, targeted 37 races across the state of North Carolina in which we thought we could make a difference, either by replacing rhinos with conservatives or by setting an example to other legislators who tend to forget who brung them to the dance after a couple of terms. I'm happy to say that we were victorious in 25 out of 37 races, even though we do not have an incumbent policy, as a certain national organization does, to inflate our win ratio by endorsing anti-gun incumbents who are likely to win anyway. Now, perhaps the greatest victory was taking out an incumbent congressman, namely Robert Pittenger in the 9th Congressional District. Now, GRNC had previously supported Pittenger. In fact, we helped him get elected to the North Carolina Senate in his first race back in the early 2000s. But then, just a week ago, Pittenger, for the first time, voted for gun control, specifically the so-called Fix Nix language in a recent appropriations bill in Congress. Now, for anybody who says their vote doesn't count, I want you to look at the margins in Pittenger's 2016 primary versus his 2018 primary. In 2016, the GRNC Political Victory Fund supported Pittenger over challenger Mark Harris, not because Harris was a bad candidate. He actually had a good survey and appeared to be very good, but because Pittenger had never voted against gun owners. With GRNC support in that race, Pittenger won by only 134 votes. In 2018, however, after Pittenger voted for gun control, GRNC PVF switched its support to Harris, who once again challenged Pittenger, but this time Harris won, and won, we should note, by only 814 votes. So a swing of only 948 votes unseated an incumbent congressman, 948 votes, in a race in which our political action committee, the GRNC Political Victory Fund, made automated calls, did targeted social media, and ran other appeals to roughly 16,000 gun-owning voters in the district, a number far larger than the margin of victory. Translated, GRNC PVF and gun voters more than made the margin of victory to unseat Robert Pittenger, an incumbent congressman. Elsewhere, North Carolina Representative Sam Watford had been a thorn in our side. Even though he's a Republican, Watford had voted against gun owners fully 40% of the time in his last two sessions of the General Assembly, garnering only a 60% pro-gun voting record and barely a GRNC one-star evaluation. Fortunately, Watford got ambitious, and he decided to run for a seat left open by the turmoil of having Obama appointee judges strike down political districts drawn by the Republican majority. Now, bear in mind that this was a Senate seat, harder to swing than a North Carolina House race due to the larger number of voters in the district. But GRNC PVF mailed, did automated phone calls, did targeted social media, and even radio spots against Watford in this race, and he lost to GRNC-backed Eddie Gallimore by just over 2,300 votes. Elsewhere, GRNC PVF successfully defended Joyce Krawiec in North Carolina Senate 31 by only 226 votes, we should note, as redrawn districts had forced her to run against another incumbent, Dan Barrett. In the open seat for Senate 33, we were able to install pro-gun Carl Ford, who previously served in the North Carolina House, and had a 100% pro-gun voting record and a history of bill sponsorship for gun owners. And he won over challenger Bill Sorensen. Now, Sorensen was not a bad candidate. He was a 4-star candidate, submitted a good survey, but he did not have the proven record that Carl Ford did. So I think we're going to have yet another leader there in the North Carolina Senate. Then there were 3 races in which the most stalwart pro-gun Republicans in the North Carolina House were under siege by leftists, or in some cases their own party, for being too pro-gun. One of them was George Cleveland in Onslow County. Then we had Larry Pittman in Cabarrus County, and Michael Speciale representing Beaufort, Craven, and Pamlico counties. I am happy to say that the GRNC Political Victory Fund was able to successfully defend all 3 of these pro-gun stalwarts. Now, to be sure, there were also mediocre Republicans who survived primaries by GRNC-backed challengers. Specifically, Chris Malone of Wake County survived a challenge by GRNC-backed Isaac Burke. Now, Malone had voted against us in recent sessions of the General Assembly. Similarly, Frank Eiler had survived a bid against him by a GRNC-backed challenger, and Ted Davis of New Hanover County survived a bid by Hunter Ford. Now, they survived, but regardless, the message was delivered loud and clear that if you vote against the Second Amendment, we will come after you, each time, every time, regardless of the odds of victory. That is the critical step in making sure that legislators understand that what they do in the legislative season will be paid for in the election season. Now, as much as I would love to tell you we can sit back and rest, the November elections are hard upon us. And if the leftists win control over any chamber of either Congress or especially the North Carolina General Assembly, we are in a world of hurt. In particular, a Democrat-led North Carolina legislature would vote to reverse the gains we have made in concealed carry and elsewhere over 24 years. And I can assure you that our Democrat governor, Roy Cooper, will sign whatever anti-gun bill the legislator sends him. That means we need to get ready now for the battles of November. Please go to grnc.org, that's grnc.org, and contribute to the GRNC Political Victory Fund. As always, we threw everything we had at these battles. Now we need to rearm and re-equip for the next battle. Again, that is grnc.org, and contribute to the GRNC Political Victory Fund. Meanwhile, my name is Paul Vallone. You have been listening to Guns, Politics, and Freedom on Wilmington's Big Talker 106.7, WilmingtonBigTalker.com, where each Sunday at 5 p.m. as part of the Sunday Night Political Power Block, we give you the ammunition to better defend your right to keep and bear arms. Please check out our sponsor, Hyatt Guns, America's largest gun shop at HyattGuns.com. And I also encourage you to check out my website at gunspoliticsandfreedom.com, where you can find both my writings and earlier editions of the show. See you next Sunday at 5.